I really just broke down and started crying because by the time this allergy came along, I was like 17 years old. And I felt like at 17, my entire life was collapsing. I didn't know what was going to happen. I'd been hearing about people not living very long. I'd had a doctor already tell me that I probably wouldn't see 18. And I did not know what to do. And I was very young. So, it just seemed like this really was the end. And then, mind you, I'm still in school. So I haven't told anybody I go to school with that I've had this diagnosis. As a matter of fact, and if any of them are listening to this podcast, this is probably going to be the first time they've ever heard about it, because I never like talking about things like that. And then I would have, little things happen where people would kind of look at me funny. Like, I remember I was in my school band and I had to wear a brace on my wrist for weeks because I was having this weird issue where I would like try to open up doors or cabinets and it would feel like somebody had put a vice grip around my wrist and they were just squeezing. And it just a simple kitchen drawer, it felt like my arm was going to break. And they did x-rays and they had me in this brace, and of course it was my right hand, I'm right-handed, so I would have to have assistants at school trying to, like, when you go into the band room, you have to sign the sheet on the board, and other students would just walk up, they would see my hand, they would sign for me, and nobody ever just, dug in and was like, what's happening, what's going on, why are you wearing that? Um, I think the only time anything was ever made a big deal of was when I was in ninth grade, I want to say, and it was the first time my teachers had found out about me having juvenile RA. And the reason why it came up is because I was so super tired all the time. Like, I went through this whole stage where I couldn't stay awake for anything. And it was like, oh, teenager going through puberty, blah, blah, blah. And then I went to go and see my doctor, and he was like, no, she has chronic fatigue syndrome. And I didn't know what that was. And they had to write a letter to my teachers explaining that I had juvenile RA and I had CFS, and that if I were to get, if I were to doze off or if I was getting dizzy or if I was in pain, like what they were supposed to do next, it had to go to all my teachers. It had to go to my principal. And I remember I had a social studies teacher at the time whose husband had been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis not too long before she found out about me. And when she read the letter from the doctor, she started crying. And I was like, oh my gosh, if other students realize she's crying, then they're going to want to know why she's crying. And everybody's going to know about it. And I never wanted people to know that there was something that severe wrong with me. Um, and as these podcasts go on, there's a lot of things that all of you are going to learn about me now that you'll find that in school, I did not talk about these things because I didn't want people to look at me like, oh, well, that was a sick girl, or this happened to her, or that happened to her. So I really didn't speak on a lot. And for people who went to school with me and wonder why I kind of stayed in my own little circle of friends and I really didn't like hanging out or talking much, now you know. Um, so as time goes on, it seems like diagnosis after diagnosis being piled on, and it just started to get a little, I don't know, kind of out of hand. It was just kind of strange that every time I went to the doctor, there was another diagnosis. And it's like, okay, do I still have the last thing? Is this a new thing? Is this the thing? Like, no one knew. Um, and then as I got a little older, I want to say probably in my late teens, early 20s, I was anywhere from 19 to 21, um, Sjogren's was diagnosed because I used to have this issue where, like, I would lose blood flow almost to the tips of my fingers. Like, my fingers would turn like a bluish gray and my hands would be ice cold. And it got to the point where my extremities, period, would just be cold, but it was mainly in my hands. Um, so then that was the next diagnosis that came. And then for probably about 10 years, 10, 15 years after that, it was just a hodgepodge of no, it's that. Well, no, it's this. Well, it could be this. I think it's that. You know what? I have no clue what it is. And then doctors just finally got to the point where they're like, we have absolutely no clue what's happening to you. Um, So it was all kinds of little things in between there. They thought I had Lyme disease. Then one doctor thought I had MS. And, it was constant. Well, this fits. Well, this fits. Well, this kind of fits. Well, this doesn't fit, but I got to say something to you. So here it is. And it got to the point where I stopped going to doctors altogether. Like I was over it completely. And, so far, I've got lupus and I've got rheumatoid arthritis and I've got, chronic fatigue syndrome. I've got now this Sjogren's, and I'm like, okay, maybe I don't have any of it. And, this is just, I don't know, growing pains. Like, I thought 1,001 things in between that time frame because I'm like, nobody else seems to know what's happening, so whatever. And during that time, I had gone to college, graduated, got married, had 2 children, and after having my children, things really took a really, really bad turn. Now, mind you, I was initially told I'd never live to see 21. And then I was told that I would never have children. I would never be able to. And for a while, I believed it. But I was like, you were also wrong about me not being alive right now. So I'm going to just live my life and whatever happens, happens. So I had 2 girls. And for most of you who actually know me, I have 2 daughters. My youngest just turned 21. And my oldest will be 23 on the 28th of this month. And, after my oldest daughter was born, I had a few issues here and there with like muscle weakness and things like that. And it seemed like I was deteriorating. And then I had a moment in there where I bounced back. But after my second daughter was born, everything just became so dark and so bad. Like I actually started to believe I was really for real going to die. I know when I was younger, it was like they would tell me I was going to die, and I was concerned with it, but it was because I was young. But after my second child was born, I was absolutely convinced that there was no way I was going to see my daughters make it to 21 and 23. I had started having these mini strokes, is the best way they could describe it. Now I've found out they're not exactly sure what it is, but it gives off the appearance that I'm having a stroke. At first they told me there was nothing happening to me. And then the doctor that I've had since I was very young, who was still my physician at the time, she told me to come in, and she did an MRI. And while she was doing the MRI, my face started hurting, my head started to hurt. And I told her I had to and I'm not claustrophobic at all. I told her I had to get out of the machine because my face. And she told me to just hold on. And when she finally pulled me out, she was like, I saw it. She was like, for a few minutes, the blood just stopped flowing to one side of your brain. Like I saw it when it just stopped. So she put me on this medication, and I want to say now it's called Iteral. I stopped taking it so long ago. That could be completely wrong. But that's the name I'm remembering right now is Iteral. But she put me on this medication. It was supposed to make sure that would not happen again. I took it for maybe a month. Now, I'm classically known for taking medication for a very short period of time and flushing the rest because I'm just not a good pill taker. I'm absolutely surprised I've kept up with taking my vitamins every day. So I had taken the medication for a short period of time, and then I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. Because I had started having weird side effects, and my hands started to shake, and I had this weird twitch in my head where I could not hold my head still for nothing. If you did not know any better, you would think I had Parkinson's. I started to shake so bad. And I thought it was the medication. So I quit taking it, and when I went back to go and see her, she was like, it's not the medication. We don't know where the twitch is coming from, but it's somehow tied to the condition itself that's causing me to have, from what they can tell, were strokes. And I could not stop shaking for anything. Also during that time, because this had happened so many times back to back, at one point I had lost my memory. I could not tell you my children's names. I would look at family members and know they were family members, but would not know who they were specifically. Like, I knew who my mother was, and it's gonna sound weird. I knew who she was. Like, I know that's Brenda, but I could not tell you her name, even though I knew who she was. Like, her name wouldn't come to me. And it's like, I know we're related, but I couldn't put it all together. Like, it was real confusing. And I couldn't hold my own newborn because I had started shaking so bad. I was scared to drop her because she was very, very tiny. So my baby was a preemie. And when I would hold her, I would hold her on a pillow just to make sure. But I was scared to even pick her up. And from there, I deteriorated to the point where I couldn't go up and down the stairs without falling. I could barely make it from the front of the house to the back of the house without falling into something or passing out. Like, it just got to be bad, bad. And then I started having these lesions on my breast that it looked like somebody took and dug a hole in me and pulled out a chunk of flesh, and what was left was black. And I was like, is that necrosis? Like, what is going on there? Go back to see the doctor again, and he takes some tests, and he was like, well, it could be this or it could be that. So I go see my doctor, and she's like, you need to see a specialist for that. So I go and see the specialist. Now, I'm going to say this before I tell you what the specialist told me. He didn't really seem to care. And I won't say that he didn't care about the situation. He really didn't seem to know his butthole from a hole in the ground. Like, he seemed lost. Like, he seemed like he was figuring it out right along with me. Like, he would occasionally even look at me like, do you have an idea? Because I don't. Okay, well, let's go with this. Like, he seemed confused. Like, he had no idea what he was talking about. So I go and I see him, and then I get my diagnosis back. And this happened to be the same doctor that saw my grandparents. He was the same doctor who saw my godmother. So they were already familiar with him when my doctor sent me over there. I go to see him. He sends the diagnosis back. He tells us that I have breast cancer. My whole family falls apart again. Because it's like, I can't catch a break for nothing. And now I've got 2 small children, and you're telling me I've got breast cancer, and with all the other health conditions I have going on, there's no way I'm getting ready to beat this. It's just not going to happen. And I think I kind of went through a depression for a while, and then it was kind of like an acceptance thing. And then I started getting so weak. There was a hospital bed that was in my mother's dining room. So, the dining room table was in the middle of the floor. There was a desk up against, like, the right wall. She had a second fridge that sat over there. And then on the opposite wall, like, if you were to walk into her dining room, when you make a left, to the very left wall, there was a hospital bed, a small hospital bed that was there. And that's where I ended up sleeping all the time. Like, I laid in that hospital bed every single day. I would be so tired and so weak from everything that was happening to me. There were days where I wouldn't remember waking up, falling asleep, what happened that day, seeing my children. Like, it was like days were just passing, and I was kind of just there. And people would come in and out and check on me and, make sure what I need. Did I eat? And half the time I didn't want to eat. I couldn't eat. And they would come in and out and make sure I was okay. And at one point, I had one doctor just flat out tell me, you know what? You're not going to make it. And your family's going to watch you die because there's nothing we can do. And my mom tried to figure out for the longest, with all that's going on, why hasn't this child been hospitalized? Because mind you, I was sent home. I was never hospitalized for any of this. Now, once that doctor diagnosed me with breast cancer, then it was like, okay, well, you have to go over to this hospital and you have to have this treatment and you have to do this. And I put the appointment off. Crazy, I know. But I decided to put off the appointment to the cancer center. And I went to the library instead and got myself together. And my younger sister, bless her, because there's been a few times where it seemed like things were going downhill. And she was right there. I almost miscarried my second child, and she was right there to give me